The last transmission came in 2 words: I die. That was it. No explanation, no name, no position, just those 2 words crackling across a maritime radio frequency somewhere in the Strait of Malacca, and then silence. The ship that sent it was called the SS Ourang Medan, and when rescuers finally reached it and climbed aboard, they found every member of the crew dead. Not wounded, not starved, not drowned, just dead. Eyes open, teeth bared, faces twisted into expressions of what the rescuers would later describe as pure, unfiltered terror. Not a single mark on any of them. And then, before anyone could understand what had happened, the ship exploded, sank within minutes, taking every body, every piece of cargo, every shred of evidence straight to the bottom of the ocean. That was 1947, and to this day, nobody has explained what killed those men. Some people aren't even sure the ship was real. To understand the Ourang Medan, you have to understand the world it existed in. The Second World War had just ended 2 years earlier. The Pacific and Indian Ocean shipping lanes were flooded with vessels carrying cargo that nobody wanted officially documented: decommissioned military equipment, chemical weapons, experimental compounds, black market goods. The war had created a massive shadow economy at sea. Ships were sailing routes that didn't appear on any official manifest, carrying things that weren't listed anywhere. The Strait of Malacca, the narrow corridor of water between the Malay Peninsula and the island of Sumatra, was one of the busiest maritime choke points in the world. Still is. And in 1947, it was crawling with exactly this kind of traffic. The Ourang Medan departed from an unspecified Chinese port, reportedly carrying a cargo that included potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin. Not typical freight, not freight that gets declared openly. The kind of cargo that, if something went wrong with it, would kill everyone on board before they had time to understand what was happening. The ship was somewhere in the Strait of Malacca when, in June of 1947, nearby vessels began picking up an extraordinarily disturbing series of Morse code transmissions. The first message: SOS from Ourang Medan. We float, all officers including the captain dead, lying in chart room and on bridge, probably whole of crew dead. A pause. Then a burst of unintelligible dots and dashes. Then, chillingly, I die. After that, nothing. 2 ships in the area received the transmission. One of them, an American merchant vessel called the Silver Star, altered course immediately and moved toward the coordinates. What they found when they arrived was a ship that looked, on the outside, completely intact. No visible damage, no fire, no signs of collision or structural failure. The Ourang Medan was simply drifting, engines off, lights off, not responding to any hails by radio or signal lamp. The Silver Star's crew prepared to board. What happened next is where the Ourang Medan becomes something other than a maritime accident. The boarding party climbed aboard to find the crew of the Ourang Medan scattered across the ship, on the deck, in the wheelhouse, on the bridge, in the communications room, everywhere, all dead, all in the positions they had apparently occupied when death arrived, as if it had come suddenly, without warning, without time to move. The crew's faces were locked in expressions of absolute terror. Eyes wide open, staring upward, teeth clenched and bared, bodies rigid, arms partially raised. The Silver Star's crew described it later as looking like men who had seen something so frightening that the fear itself had killed them. No wounds, no blood, no signs of physical struggle anywhere on the ship. The men had simply stopped, terrified and still. Even the ship's dog was dead, found mid-snarl,
lips pulled back as if it had died trying to bark at something that wasn't there anymore. The Silver Star's captain took stock of the situation. He ordered his crew not to touch anything. They rigged a tow line. The plan was to haul the Ourang Medan to the nearest port, where a proper investigation could begin. They never made it. Within a short time of the tow line being attached, members of the Silver Star crew noticed something. Smoke rising from the lower decks of the Ourang Medan, from the cargo hold specifically. The Ourang Medan exploded, not a small fire breaking out, an explosion so violent that multiple accounts describe the ship being physically lifted from the surface of the water before falling back and sinking rapidly, taking everything with it. Every body, every piece of cargo, every possible avenue of forensic investigation, gone. The Silver Star crew got clear just in time. They reported the incident, filed an account, and that, in theory, should have been the beginning of an official investigation into one of the most disturbing maritime incidents of the 20th century. Except, that's where the second mystery begins. There is no official record of the SS Ourang Medan, not in Lloyd's Register of Shipping, the authoritative record of registered vessels globally, not in Dutch maritime records, not in any port authority files in the region. No registration, no manifest, no insurance record, nothing. A ship that sent a distress call received by multiple vessels whose crew were witnessed dead by the boarding party of another ship, and it doesn't officially exist. Let's sit with that for a moment, because the absence of records is not by itself evidence of conspiracy. Ships were frequently registered through indirect or incomplete channels in the post-war period. Vessels carrying illegal or politically sensitive cargo would have every reason to minimize their paper trail. The leading theory, supported by the physical evidence and the behavior of the explosion, is that the Ourang Medan was carrying potassium cyanide and possibly nitroglycerin in its hold. These are extremely volatile materials. Potassium cyanide, when exposed to seawater, releases hydrogen cyanide, gas, colorless, odorless in low concentrations, lethal at relatively modest exposure levels. A slow leak in a sealed cargo hold in a ship moving through warm equatorial waters could absolutely produce a deadly concentration of gas throughout the vessel's interior, rapidly enough to kill everyone on board before they had time to react or raise an alarm. That explains the lack of physical injuries. It explains the sudden, simultaneous death of the entire crew. It explains why the dog died. It possibly even explains the expressions on the faces. Hydrogen cyanide poisoning produces extreme physiological distress in its victims. The convulsions, the rigid posture, the bared teeth, these are consistent with cyanide toxicity, not with natural causes. And the explosion? Potassium cyanide stored alongside nitroglycerin in a warm, potentially damp cargo hold with a leak already in progress. That is an explosion waiting to happen.
The distress calls were received over a period of time, not a single brief transmission, but a sequence. Someone was alive long enough to compose and send multiple messages. If the crew had been overcome by a cyanide gas leak, the progression from "everyone is dying" to "I die" makes sense. But cyanide acts fast. The coherence of those final transmissions, specifically the clarity of "I die" as a deliberate final message, implies a level of consciousness and intention that is harder to reconcile with a gas poisoning scenario. Who sent that last message? What did they see? What were they trying to communicate? The second problem is the expressions. Cyanide poisoning produces a very specific physical presentation. The descriptions from the boarding party, the upturned faces, the wide eyes, the expressions that witnesses consistently described as terror rather than pain, don't match cleanly with what cyanide victims typically look like. Third, the Ourang Medan is not the only ship from this period to have been found with dead crews showing no conventional cause of death. The post-war Pacific and Indian Ocean trade routes have a documented history of vessels found drifting with dead or missing crews. And fourth, perhaps most critically, the German angle. In 1953, a German-language publication called Das Totenschiff in der Südsee, roughly translated as The Death Ship in the South Sea, appeared. Written by a scholar named Otto Mielke, the booklet presented itself as a factual account of the Ourang Medan incident. It suggested, among other things, that the ship's cargo included not just conventional chemicals, but materials connected to post-war Japanese military experiments, biological or chemical agents developed during the war that were being quietly moved through the Pacific trade routes after Japan's defeat. Return to the boarding party. They were ordinary sailors, experienced men, used to difficult and unusual situations. They had worked these shipping lanes for years. They had seen things. They boarded the Ourang Medan prepared for a medical emergency, a navigation accident, some kind of mechanical failure. They were not prepared for what they found. One member of the Silver Star boarding party, in an account that circulated afterward, said something that has stayed attached to the Ourang Medan story ever since. He said that as they moved through the ship, through the chart room, past the crew quarters, up to the bridge, he had a specific feeling. Not fear exactly, something beneath fear. Something that told him whatever had happened on that ship had not finished happening, that it was still there. The SS Ourang Medan has never been found. No wreck has been officially identified. No surviving crew member has ever come forward. No government has ever acknowledged the ship or its cargo. The name Ourang Medan, man from Medan, has outlasted every official attempt to erase it. It appears in maritime records databases, in true crime archives, in naval history journals, in the footnotes of academic papers about post-war Pacific shipping. It inspired a video game, Man of Medan, and countless documentaries. The story keeps resurfacing because the questions it raises don't go away. What was on that ship? What happened to those men in the hours before that first distress call? Who sent the final transmission? And was whatever killed them, gas, conspiracy, cover-up, the last of its kind? Or was it just the one that happened to produce a distress signal before it disappeared? There are no answers. There is no wreck to dive on. There is no survivor to interview. There is no declassified file that resolves the central questions. There are only the accounts of men who boarded a ghost ship in 1947, saw something that changed them, and barely got clear before the sea swallowed every piece of evidence. The Strait of Malacca is 550 miles long and up to 200 miles wide. Every single day, around 90,000 ships pass through it, one of the busiest waterways on Earth. Somewhere below that water, if the story is true, the SS Ourang Medan is still down there, and whatever it was carrying is still with it. This case has never been officially resolved. The ship has never been found. The cause of death of the crew has never been established.